Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining us today for our session on simplifying data operations and access to insights with the Splunk Dataflow Template. My name is Lauren, and I'm the content manager for the Google Cloud community. Joining us today are Roy and Spencer from the Google Cloud team and Matt from Splunk. So we're really excited and happy to have you here. Thank you for sharing your insights and information. They will also be answering your questions today. So if you have any questions, please feel free to add those into the YouTube chat box, and we'll be sure to get to them either in the chat or at the end of the presentation. We did get a few pre-submitted questions, so we'll be going through those as well. And if we don't get to your question, we will be following up with you in the Google Cloud community with a recap blog post. So stay tuned for that. And the link to the community is in the YouTube description, along with several other resources that we'll be calling out and mentioning today. All right, so with that, I will hand it over to you, Roy, and the team to take us through the content today.
Thank you, Lauren. My name is Roy Arsan, everybody. I'm a solutions architect at Google Cloud. Matt, you want to quickly introduce yourself?
Sure. My name is Matt Height. I'm a sales engineer at Splunk, and I work on the Google Cloud partnership.
And Spencer?
And I'm Spencer Ponce, and I'm a technical account manager for Google Cloud.
Excellent. So folks, we're going to kick it off in the next 30 minutes. We're going to talk about the native deep integration between Google Cloud and Splunk, when and how to make use of it. Our goal here is by the end of the session, you will feel more comfortable using, and by using, I mean deploying and operating this solution in order to spend less time on data operations and more time getting insights. So first, why are we gathered here? Because we all have questions in life, but also questions part of our job. And you want to get data-driven answers. You may be a security analyst wondering if there's any unusual activity in your company's infrastructure. Maybe you configured your load balancer security policies to reject exploit attempts, but you want to confirm that it's working as you configured them. Maybe you're an application developer or an SRE operator wondering what's the usage and performance of your application over time and whether you're meeting your SLIs. Your SLOs. Maybe you're the CFO analyzing your cloud spend, or an IT manager confirming whether your infrastructure is properly utilized, especially in the current, cost-conscious environment that we are in. And to help you answer these questions, Google Cloud offers mountains of data from your cloud audit trails, whether it's administrative actions or user activity, your network logs, your asset inventories, security command center findings and alerts, your application logs, container logs, metrics, billing reports, the list goes on. So I'm going to invite you, if you can type in the chat, what data you're most interested in and for what use case. For example, you could say firewall rules logs for compliance purposes. Or maybe, the audit logs for security. Or maybe application logs for application performance monitoring. So as folks type in these, these use cases, that would help us, tailor this conversation. But really, we want you to be able to easily access that data. We want to be able to, whether you want to use our tools or third-party tools, we want you to be able to share that data with whatever tools you use, including partner solutions like Splunk. We want you to be able to do so easily, securely, and reliably, which is why we released our native integration with Splunk back in 2020, aka our Splunk Dataflow solution. We've continued to invest heavily in this integration, given joint customer demand, fast adoption, and quite frankly, the business critical nature of it. So what is Splunk Dataflow solution? Let's spend a minute on this architecture diagram and establish a common language and a common baseline, especially for those who are not familiar with the Dataflow. So Cloud Dataflow is Google Cloud's managed data processing service. It uses Apache Beam, which is an open source programming model, to handle both types of data processing jobs, batch and streaming. As you might expect, a common use case is to move data from one system to another. But you don't have to write these data flow jobs from scratch. Google Cloud offers several data flow templates that are purpose-built to move data between specific services. In this case, we have a data flow template to move data from PubSub to Splunk, which is at the center of this diagram, streaming data from left to right. Over to the right is the destination, that is Splunk HTTP Event Collector or Splunk HEC, be it Splunk Enterprise or Splunk Cloud, whether it's hosted on GCP or elsewhere. Over to the left, which is the source, you have a PubSub subscription. Now, what is PubSub? For those who are not familiar, PubSub is Google Cloud's managed real-time messaging service, which in this case is used to collect data, most commonly logs, but not just logs, using what we call a log sync from cloud logging. Now, if you recall, we want to make this integration with Splunk simple, secure, and reliable. So let's talk about the reliability piece. This solution is designed for high volume data. For example, a single 4-core data flow VM worker can process 12K EPS or event per second. That's more than 10x what you can achieve with a similarly sized heavy forwarder node, based on some of the performance testing done by Google and Splunk. Obviously, your specific mileage may vary, but just to give you an idea of how cost efficient and this data flow template is. Equally importantly, the volume may change over time, right? It's not just data volume, but also data variability, particularly for logs, where you might expect spikes in log volumes, and you want to be able to handle those gracefully. And Dataflow takes care of that for you with horizontal autoscaling. Along the same theme of reliability, this solution is fault tolerant, so it automatically handles common failures with retry logic, exponential backup. If an error is not transient, like for example, you have a 4xx error from Splunk, like an invalid token or index, message will be routed to a dead letter topic, which you can see at the bottom of the diagram, to ensure there's no data loss. In terms of security, we continuously update the solution with security patches and security features, integrating with Secret Manager, for example, to store your Splunk HEC token securely, or integrating with Certificate Authority Service, which is our certificate management service. So you can, if you have your own custom self-signed or private CA signed certificates, you can manage them in the Certificate Authority Service and have Splunk Dataflow trust those certificates. So you don't have to disable SSL validation, for example. And then last, in terms of simplicity, not only does this Dataflow template take care of all this transfer logic for you and handle potential errors, you can easily customize the output of this using what we call a Dataflow UDF, a user-defined function, which you can see at the top of the diagram. It's a small JavaScript code that you can insert to transform the message format. You can use it to enrich the message. You can redact some fields. You can even filter messages if you don't want them to consume Splunk, license, or you don't want it to send undesired data to your Splunk index. It doesn't require you to be a Beam or Dataflow expert. So this makes it simple to adopt and extend. Now, speaking of ease of use, you can deploy this Dataflow template straight from your Cloud Console UI. But we find that many customers choose to deploy this using a Terraform module that we provide, which brings us to our first demo in a series of demos we have for you today. So let's jump to the next tab. This is the Splunk Log Export Terraform module that, for those who are not familiar with Terraform, you give it a bunch of, it's a module, you specify some variables. In this case, where do you want this to be deployed? Let me zoom in here a little bit. You have all the different parameters for the Dataflow job itself. You can set up, how much parallel requests to Splunk. You can specify the batching for HEC. Of course, your Splunk URL and your HEC token. All of that is specified here, including extra configuration that it takes care of for you in terms of everything I showed you in the diagram it creates all these resources for you, but also it creates them securely. So it takes care of networking, it takes care of setting up a NAT gateway so your data flow workers are not exposed to the internet. So it does take care of a lot of the best practices for security hardening. Another one that, for example, is least privilege, right? So we want to make sure the service account that is running that data flow job is minimally scoped, that it has only the permissions it needs in order to process the job. And this is phenomenally important, given that we're dealing with sensitive logs. Security is top of mind. So let me jump into console UI. So just like a cooking show, actually this morning I had this pipeline bake for a couple of hours. So it's been running for a couple of hours to show you how this looks in your console. But let me jump into my Cloud Shell editor. So I'm going to activate Cloud Shell. And I'm going to open the editor in a new window. And I'm going to actually click this here a second. Okay, there we go. So this is Cloud Shell Editor and Cloud Shell Terminal. It's a hosted IDE, so you don't have to run this in your own workstation. You can literally run this in the cloud. So what I did here, I have cloned the repo that I showed you earlier, and I have it here. One of the like I mentioned, one of the Terraform input is a file with all your variables. So this is a sample file with variables that you can specify. Like I mentioned, Splunk HTTP URL and token. Now you might notice that. Let me zoom in here a little bit. You may notice that I'm using a secret manager, so there's no token being sent, neither plain text or encrypted. I'm just actually specifying a secret version. So it's securely configured, and some data flow job parameters. So like I said, I already deployed this, but let me show you what this is going to do. So let's do a quick Terraform plan to see what kind of resources it will deploy. And as you can see, it's going to deploy about 25 resources, right? So that's quite a bit that is taken care of for you. In fact, if I just grab for the resources types, so it's taking care of the network for me, it's taking care of the job itself, some DNS policy, so for DNS logging, it takes care of the log sync, monitoring dashboard, which we'll come back to in a little bit. The IAM binding, like I mentioned, it takes care of some minimum set of IAM permissions that you need. The PubSub subscription, the topics, storage bucket for storing temporary files for Dataflow template. And yeah, so I'm just going to go back to the slide.
This is great, Roy. This probably has saved you tons of time. I mean, did you used to do this by hand?
Yeah, and that's why I didn't even demonstrate how you do it via the UI.
Yeah.
Because, while you can do it, having it in Terraform is valuable, especially as you make these changes over time. Again, plan, apply will determine what changes are required. So instead of destroying everything.
And I bet there's a ton of learnings that have come and been codified into this through the many customers you've worked with on this. You've probably taken all the best practices you've learned through the School of Hard Knocks and turned it into Terraform for the benefit of the larger community. That's great. I mean,
yeah, exactly. Absolutely right. So we have a bunch of contributors internally inside Google and externally, like yourself, Matt. Continuously improving the Terraform module based on what we see with joint customers.
Yeah, looks great. Anyways, sorry to interrupt you.
No, this is good. A great point. Maybe we can take a quick question on the chat. Is there anything for CPU threshold on the template before auto scaling? Yes, there's a specific condition where Dataflow auto scaling kicks in. It's based on the CPU utilization and the backlog of the PubSub. So if I go back to the diagram here, based on the PubSub backlog, how many messages are in the subscription, and based on the CPU utilization, the Dataflow decides if it needs to upscale or downscale. Actually, scale out or scale in, right? So add more workers or remove workers. I think the utilization threshold is 25%. If it's less than 25%, it goes down, but it's documented in our Dataflow docs. Okay, moving on. So we talked about simplicity, right? And how you can deploy this with Terraform. But as part of simplicity, you want to be able to monitor this solution, right? It's funny because this is part of your monitoring solution, but who's monitoring the monitoring solution? It's kind of like who's supervising the supervisor. So in fact, if you take a closer look into that single Dataflow product card from the architecture diagram I showed earlier, you'll notice that data goes through multiple stages. And so to prevent this from being a black box, we've added numerous metrics to improve observability of the pipeline. This way you can find out if there's any issues inside the pipeline or maybe any downstream issues communicating with Splunk. And yes, failures might occur and they will occur, and we should plan for that. So you should be able to monitor them and to recover from them. Matt will cover that in a little bit. But now I just want to say with this added instrumentation, you now have both upstream, basically that is a source, PubSub source, and downstream, which is the Splunk HEC visibility, some visibility, including message throughput, failed messages over time, request errors, both with PubSub and Splunk APIs. You get Splunk-specific visibility like HEC response status breakdown, average latency, average batch size, all of that to help you troubleshoot any issues with Splunk. Now, I understand this is a lot of metric to keep track of. So we encapsulated all of this into a single cloud monitoring dashboard that you can deploy as part of your Terraform module that I've shown you earlier. So let's see how that looks live. I'm going to jump into this dashboard that was deployed, again, alongside the pipeline, what we call a Splunk log export ops, right? So this dashboard is a single pane of glass for monitoring your PubSub to Splunk Dataflow pipeline. You use it to monitor your log, whether your log export is meeting your dynamic log volume requirements by scaling to sufficient EPS throughput rate, while keeping the latency and the backlog to a minimum. So at the top, you can have those key KPIs. Like I said, I ran this a couple of hours ago, and it's already exported about 18,000 messages. This is fairly low. This is like a trickle, a couple of events per second being sent, but this is just for demo purposes. There's almost zero backlog, and there's nothing in the dead letter queue, so I'm good. And then it shows you the input throughput, the output throughput. Again, Splunk-specific metrics like batch size and latency to elevate any issues to you and alert you on those before they cascade. Total messages exported, failed. This is good that there's no data available. That means it's basically zero message failed. And then last but not least, it shows you the pipeline utilization, right? Now, this panel is important because it helps you track pipeline resource usage. In this case, we have 4 cores running, fairly low CPU utilization, but it's just one machine running. And this helps you validate that the pipeline is running, cost efficiently during the steady state. And then there's also some logs that are shown to you. Again, you can access those logs, directly from Log Explorer and Cloud Logging, but we make everything available to you in one dashboard. Those are the relevant error logs that you want to take a look to help you troubleshoot any issues when that happens. So now I'll pass it on to Matt, who will show you how you can diagnose a potential issue, and most importantly, how you can recover from it without losing any data.
Thanks, Roy. So we've seen a ton of great information on the Terraform that's provided, and Roy's shown the dashboard and some of the features of it. So what I want to show you in this demo is from the operator perspective of somebody who's encountered an issue with the transmission of data through the Dataflow pipeline of those logs into Splunk, and using the tools that are provided and walking through a scenario where we're investigating and remediating a missing data situation. So let's go ahead and roll the demo. Learn how to identify a root cause, remediate it, and perform a backfill so we have all our data present in our timeline again. So how are we going to do this? Well, first thing I'm going to show you this monitoring dashboard that ships with the Terraform repository. I'm going to show you a log delivery breakage issue, and then we'll investigate this, fix it. I'm going to show you how to confirm it's recovering. And once we've done that, we're going to launch a backfill data flow pipeline. And again, we're going to confirm that backfill has completed successfully. And then once we've done that, we'll remove the backfill data flow pipeline. So here is the dashboard that's deployed with my pipeline. So there's a lot going on here. All of this is a treasure trove of information, and you're going to use it to help troubleshoot an issue we've spotted in Splunk. Specifically, I can see in my GCP data index, I am missing data. So I can see that data stopped being transmitted to me probably around 9:25 a.m. today. And we haven't received any data since then. So there's clearly something impeding the delivery of Google Cloud log data to Splunk. And we can hop over to that dashboard and get an overview of what the issue might be. So the first thing I want to draw your eye to is this dead letter queue size. So the dead letter queue is where any messages that can't be delivered get put so that at a later time, an operator can fix the root cause of an issue and then take those dead letter messages and put them back on the topic for consumption and replay into Splunk so we can do a backfill. So we're not quite ready to do that yet, but we will be coming back to that. The other notable thing we can take a look at is the output throughput to Splunk, and I can see around 9:25, which correlates with what I saw on the Splunk timeline, that EPS dropped to 0. So basically no messages being sent to Splunk. I can also see somewhere around that same time, I started receiving 400 series response codes from Splunk back to the Dataflow workers. And a 400 error message is basically the HTTP status code that's going to tell us that access is denied, or more practically speaking, my token is bad or it's been disabled. So I can actually get more specific understanding of what the 400 means by scrolling down here to the bottom and looking at the worker log. So I can see specifically the error message is token disabled. So on the Splunk side, Splunk is refusing to accept the messages, giving a 403 HTTP status code and saying, this token you're using to send this log message, it's been disabled, so I'm not going to accept it. So we can see over here in the HTTP event collector configuration on my Splunk server, I can actually see that it is indeed disabled for whatever reason. So for the purpose of this demo, I'm actually going to re-enable it. And then we will be able to observe recovery in both our timeline view and also in the Dataflow dashboard view. That will take a few minutes. You can see that once re-enabling that token, things have recovered. Output throughput to Splunk has back from 0 back to a nominal rate. You'll see the 400s are going away, and that total messages failed has dropped back down to 0. So these are all great signs. Let's hop over to Splunk and do another search. And yes, I can see that events are delivered again. We do have this big gap though. And as the operator, I would love to not have missing data. So next we're going to take a look at how to take the events that are on the dead letter queue and send them back through the Dataflow pipeline for delivery to Splunk. Now, please note, you should only launch the dead letter queue replay after you've discovered the root cause of your issue and fixed it. Hopping over my Terraform config variables, I'm going to basically make a change to this last line, deploy underscore replay underscore job. I'm going to change that value from false to true, write it out to disk. And then I'm going to do a Terraform apply. Okay, the pipeline is launching. This pipeline is going to take everything on the dead letter queue and put it back in the topic for consumption by our main pipeline, which does delivery to Splunk. So that'll take a few minutes, and we'll monitor this dashboard, waiting for the dead letter queue size to start to drop and come back down to 0. So this will take a few minutes to happen too. All right, we can pretty clearly see in our dashboard that the dead letter queue size has returned to 0. And we can also see a nice big spike in our output throughput to Splunk where all those dead letters were retransmitted and the backfill was performed. So let's take a look at what Splunk looks like now with the search. So as we saw here before, we have the gap of data. I'm going to do another search, and what we see now is the data has been backfilled and there's no longer a gap, which is great. No data loss. So now that we've performed the backfill and we've confirmed that the backfill is complete, the one last thing to do is to purge that replay pipeline back in Terraform. So to do that, I'm going to change deploy replay job back to false. Write that back out to disk. And then I'm going to run Terraform apply again. When I do this, this will remove the replay pipeline. And that's it. That's our cleanup task. So you've seen how to identify the issue, troubleshoot with the dashboard, remediate it, perform the backfill. And that concludes our demo. All right. What do you think, Roy?
That's awesome. You know, we all love when that timeline is filled up. So nice work. Great to see it. Less time spent on troubleshooting and fixing, and obviously more time spent analyzing the data.
Yeah, I really like the replay pipeline and how that's included in the Terraform template. I think it's kind of like maybe like a hidden feature a lot of people don't realize. So just wanted to show a practical example of coming from broken to discovering how to fix it, fixing it, and then not just fixing it, but getting that data that was waiting in the corridors and that dead letter topic to get that back and replayed into Splunk. So hopefully people learned a little bit of a practical troubleshooting situation. So I think as we have,
and also folks, don't worry if you didn't catch the exact UDF that Matt used or the different steps. We have a solution guide. It's called Splunk Dataflow guide with all of these steps, including recovering from failures like Matt just showed. And we'll share in the links at the end of the talk.
Yeah. So if we throw back up the slides here, we can get to the next section. Okay, so we did talk a lot about getting the data into Splunk using the Dataflow template. So let's just spend a minute or two talking about what people are doing with this data once it's in Splunk, because I think that's sort of like the next natural question people end up, because we spend a lot of time getting it there. So let's do something with it. So we can go forward one more. So I want to make sure everybody knows about this add-on for Splunk. So this is the Splunk add-on for the Google Cloud Platform. And I always suggest people install this. Even if you're not going to use the PubSub input that's part of this, and you're going to use Dataflow, which I encourage you to do because I'm a big fan of it, there's a lot of benefit from just having this installed. It's going to do source typing for you. It's also includes some other inputs that you might be interested in using, like the billing input and some metadata inputs. But it also sets the stage for the next slide, which is, go for one more, the GCP application template for Splunk, which can build on top of both the data that we're sending in from Dataflow and the GCP TA. If you add this GCP application template for Splunk, you're going to have a starter kit for visualizing a lot of the data that you are ingesting through either of those methods. And I'm going to just kind of go to the next video here where we're going to do like a little drive-by cruise through the GCP application template to get an idea of what you can do with this. So if we can roll this next short video.
The GCP App Template is a starter kit for visualizing, analyzing, investigating, and troubleshooting with Google Cloud Logs inside Splunk. It includes a number of dashboards that can be used out of the box to monitor GCP infrastructure activity, your cloud asset inventory, compute engine instances, container instances, cloud functions, VPC networks, Google App Engine, BigQuery, and Cloud SQL. You can use these dashboards as an inspiration and as guidance for creating your own dashboards. But even with just the content that's included out of the box, you're still going to get a tremendous amount of value. And you'll have access to a great set of tools for doing things like drilling into and investigating audit log activities. If you are also a Splunk Observability Cloud customer, GCP App Template includes example dashboards, which can make GCP metrics from there, display them alongside your log analytics. All a great starting point for going deep with your Google Cloud data inside Splunk.
All right, that's just a quick drive-by harbor cruise view of what that application template is and that starter kit for that. So that's where I like to point people who are looking to get started with visualizing their Google Cloud data inside Splunk. We'll make sure a link to that gets put into the stream chat and give that a look.
We have a question.
Yes.
What about SIM compliance? Splunk SIM compliance.
Yes. So the first add-on that I showed was the Splunk Addon for Google Cloud Platform. We'll get a link to that into the stream also. And this is one of the baseline apps you would want to install, or add-ons that you want to install that can give you SIM mapping for various Google Cloud data, in addition to the source typing and other things like that.
Excellent. Yeah, because a lot of customers ask us about, hey, I got this data into Splunk, and do I need to normalize it or source type it? But a lot of it is taken care of for you with the Splunk add-on for Google Cloud Platform. Refer to Splunk docs for the most recent list of source types and SIM models,
Yes.
especially around security domain.
Yeah. All right. Well, that's all I've got to show. So we can move forward and talk about what's next.
Awesome. Thank you so
you
much.
can see the resources up there. So those are the resources that Matt and I mentioned. At the top, you can see the Splunk Dataflow guide, the short link for that. Google/Splunk Dataflow guide with underscores. And then there's a hands-on lab if you prefer to actually go through a self-paced lab with a hosted environment where you don't have to run this in your own Google Cloud project. That's a great way to start. This is a hands-on lab provided by Splunk using what used to be called Quick Labs. We have also documentation both on the Dataflow side. We have product doc, but also the add-on, the aforementioned add-on from Splunk. And then last but not least, the GitHub repo that has the Terraform module that I showed earlier, but also there's a GitHub repo for the Dataflow templates itself. Like I mentioned, it is open source, so everything is in the Dataflow GitHub repo, including some UDF samples, user-defined functions that customers commonly use. I think I'll bring it back to you, Lauren.
Awesome. Thank you both so much for that information and the demos. And thank you everyone who is still with us and for your questions. Right now, we will hop into some of the pre-submitted questions that we received from the reg form. So we'll get started with those. And as we're doing that, please feel free to continue asking your questions in the chat, and we'll be sure to get to them. So our first question, if you want to go to the following slides. Awesome. And then, yeah, we'll have some additional resources and next steps to share at the end. But our first question is, how can we get or collect Gmail activity logs to Splunk? And if we have some issues, which department can help us?
Yeah, I can take that. So there are a subset of Google Workspace / G Suite logs that you can automatically configure Google Workspace to publish into Google Cloud Logging, into PubSub. And so you can actually leverage that and use the same data flow pipeline that we demonstrated to move those supported logs into Splunk. And so we'll drop a link into the stream on how to set that up on the Google Workspace side. And there's that particular integration. And then there's also an app that Splunk develops that talks directly to like Google Workspace APIs that doesn't actually involve the aforementioned. And we'll get a link to that into the stream. But between the two of those, usually that covers most customer use cases that have to do with not just Gmail, but the suite of applications of Google Workspace. So how you get support for it. So if you're using the Google Workspace export to Google Cloud, you're going to get support through your Google Workspace support channel. And similarly, if you are having an issue or troubleshooting something with the Splunk app, you would get support through the Splunk support channel. And the Google Workspace TA is a Splunk supported app. So you're able to open tickets for that.
I just want to add just to what Matt already said. This is a common request, right? Is I want to analyze both Workspace audit logs and GCP audit logs. And traditionally, you had different tool set, and it was kind of a swivel chair scenario. So now it's literally with one checkbox, you can share that data from Google Workspace into your Google Cloud account or organization. And once you enable sharing, that transfer of data is taken care of for you. So everything lives in Google Cloud now. Not everything, a large set of audit logs from Google Workspace. We're talking about admin audit, enterprise groups audit, login audit, which is one of the most requested log types. And recently we added, I say recently, but I think it's already been more than a year, but time flies. OAuth token audit and SAML audit. So the list is growing based on requests from you. So if you have specific log types that is not there, do request it. That helps us prioritize. But then when everything lives in Google Cloud, logging, it becomes easy. And that pipeline that I mentioned, the Splunk Dataflow pipeline, will capture that as well. It's basically a single unified pipeline to transfer to Splunk. That's where most customers do. The TA is still useful. At the very least, use that for normalization, etc. We can jump to the next question. Shall we take one from the chat?
Yep. Yeah, good call. So, and we'll share a couple of those resources on this question in just a moment. But yes, here's another question from the chat. What sort of lag does UDF template introduce? Also, how to use PubSub's attribute keys value in UDF template?
Yeah, I can take that on. That's a great question, Sybil. So, in fact, if I may show my console, we quickly went over this. Perfect. So this is a running pipeline, right? So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to clone this to demonstrate this for you quickly. And I'm going to show here. This is actually recently GA. And I'm happy to announce that we have now a way to edit user-defined function in the console. I realize this doesn't let me zoom in a little bit here. Now you can edit the DF function from the console as you deploy your pipeline. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to pick up one of the sample UDF in the GitHub repo. I'm just going to copy that in and use it in my job deployment workflow. So specifically, you're asking, so let me zoom in a little bit more. So what this is going to do is I specify a cloud storage bucket. It's going to save that into my cloud storage bucket, and it's going to assign it to the Dataflow job as an extra transformation step, right? So common scenarios is, I need to delete a certain field. Let's say I don't want to have, for whatever reason, I want to delete my text payload. You can just delete that field, right? Or if you want to redact a sensitive field, let's say I have, data that sensitive field, you don't want to send it to Splunk, you can mark it as redacted, right? Obviously, we have our own data loss prevention solution to help you redact, but also anonymize the data, so you can still do the statistical analysis, but that's a different story. And also you can assign metadata to Splunk, right? Index, source type, you can override those. So a lot of things you can do on the EDF side. Now, how to use PubSub attribute keys? You can see how you can access the object attributes here. Those are your PubSub attributes. So you can access them and you can override them. There is a parameter that you need to set as part of your Dataflow job to include the PubSub message, not just the data payload, but also the wrapper message. That's also documented in the Dataflow product documentation, Dataflow template product documentation. If you still have questions, don't hesitate to ping us in the chat or in the cloud community forum that I'm sure Lauren will share.
Absolutely. Awesome. Thanks, Roy. And thanks for your question.
Back to the slide.
Yep. We'll go back to our next question. How to use Splunk on-prem with GCP VMs? What are the advantages? How to send org level log sync data to on-prem Splunk?
Sure, I'll grab that one. So we do publish a white paper that's titled Deploying Splunk Enterprise on Google Cloud Platform, and we'll get a link to that into the stream. And what are the advantages? So this is kind of going to be specific to your use case, but different people will have different preference on how and where they want to run their workload. So we do sell Splunk Cloud on GCP solution, and that's a popular option. And then there's other customers who are still interested in managing and running and architecting their own Splunk enterprise, and that is available on option. And that's what we want to support with the publication of that white paper. And I think the advantage will just be customer specific. And then there's a question about how to send org level log sync data to the on-prem to Splunk. That Terraform template that has been shown throughout this session does have support for building a log sync at the org level. It is commented out in the code, but it's pretty easy to uncomment it if you want. And then we were kind of talking about at some point turning that into kind of like a first class feature. Anything you want to add to that answer, Roy?
No, you got it, Matt.
Okay.
Thank you.
Awesome. Is there a way to get this template working with PubSub Lite?
Yeah, I can take that too, or you can take it, Roy. Depends. I was just going to mention, like right now, the template is just PubSub, and the use case of the template is to support, or the primary use case of the template is to support the log router, and the log router publishes to PubSub. It does not yet support the PubSub Lite. So that's not to say that one day it won't, or all of this won't, and when it does, I'm sure that's the point at which the template would be looking at adding a feature of supporting PubSub Lite. There's an opportunity to sort of voice your opinion in the Google issue tracker of features that you would like to see to the log router or the Dataflow template. And those are places customers can voice that opinion or that request of adding that feature. I'm sure you can add some more on that.
And also, since it's specific to a Dataflow template, you also could file an issue against the Dataflow templates repo, and our development team read those and consider those as part of their feature and roadmap prioritization. So I encourage you, if you have a specific use case to use PubSub Lite, they can consider building a template for that.
Yeah.
Awesome. All right. So how does Splunk integrate with intrusion detection system?
So
want to take that on?
Yeah, I'm going to assume this is talking about the Google Cloud IDS. And if not, feel free to shout otherwise in the chat. But we do have an integration and an app that was designed when Google Cloud launched the Google Cloud IDS feature. And that's available in our Splunk-based market. And I'll get a link to that into the stream. But this is an app that was developed to support the Cloud IDS log data and do the SIM mapping for it. So you'll find that there. But for other intrusion detective systems, I'm going to say yes. I mean, there are so many apps in Splunk base. I would be surprised if you did not find one that supported your intrusion detection system of choice. And I mean, it's one of the main use cases of Splunk for customers tends to actually be security. So there's a ton of add-ons and apps that support different log formats from different devices that a security practitioner and different software products that a security practitioner would be interested in understanding log data for.
If I may add also, so specifically for Cloud IDS, which is Google Cloud Intrusion Detection System, both the traffic and the alerts are actually written in cloud logging. So that log sync you create, as long as the log filter captures the Cloud IDS traffic and threat logs, that will be forwarded using the same solution we talked about earlier, Splunk Dataflow pipeline. A quick plug to one of the log scope, something we call log scoping tool that we use, that customers use to identify logs in Google Cloud. This is a little bit out of scope, but specifically since you're interested in Cloud IDS, you can see Cloud IDS is one of the logs that we recommend, to consider as part of your security posture and security visibility. What this tool does, which is pretty cool, I can select Cloud IDS and it shows me the log ID. Right now, this is, let me zoom in a little bit. So you can see the threat and traffic logs. They have specific log names. So make sure you include those in your log filter as part of your log sync. Now, this is a little bit in the weeds. We'll share the link at the end of the talk. I'll share it now. But this is very valuable if you want to make sure your logs are captured in your log sync. Back.
Yeah, this is one of my favorite documentation pages on Google Cloud. I use this all the time. In fact, I used it to create the log filter that I pasted into Terraform variables for my log router. So I use it all the time. This is great. I was so happy when you released this.
Yeah. And if you don't know what you want, you can also set the log filter to nothing, which is what I did here in my demo. But be careful, you might have more logs than you desire.
Yeah.
But if you're just getting started, that's one option.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing that. And the links to those resources are now in the chat. So thank you so much. Okay, one question is, what types of GCP data can be sent to Splunk?
Okay, so this is a diagram that I made, so I'm sorry in advance, but it's supposed to illustrate different Google Cloud sources. And then sort of at the top part of the diagram. And then at the bottom layer of the diagram is different Splunk products or integration points that that leverage those data sources. So there's a lot. The most generic answer is most Google Cloud data can make its way into cloud logging. Roy pointed that out. Cloud IDS logs go into cloud logging. So just by using the Dataflow template, you'll be able to basically, with the right log router configuration, you'll be able to gather those logs and get them into Splunk. So Dataflow is a great solution for pulling things out of PubSub. And there are other things that can send into PubSub besides a log router. There's the Cloud Security Command Center, and it can actually publish findings into PubSub. You can also get cloud asset inventory updates. So as things change in your cloud resource inventory, those events can get published into the cloud, into PubSub. And so those are kind of different things that can publish into PubSub. We also have the Google Cloud Addon for Splunk, the Splunk Addon for Google Cloud Platform, which has these different inputs that support retrieving things directly from a PubSub subscription, or also retrieving metrics from cloud monitoring. It's also able to synchronize and pull down updates from the billing table inside BigQuery if you've set up billing exports to BigQuery. So that add-on does some nice stuff, and it has some other inputs just to pull general metadata down. As I mentioned, we're able to integrate with Workspace, the Workspace API through the Splunk add-on for Google Workspace. There's also our agents, which you can install on basically anywhere you control the compute. So that would be like GKE or Compute Engine. And we have another product line called the Splunk Observability Cloud, which also is able to pull cloud metrics and load into the Observability Cloud infrastructure monitoring application. So, I mean, there's a whole host of, just trying to sort of show you the overview on that diagram. But there's kind of one last thing I want to kind of open your mind to, which is Google publishes these collection of Dataflow templates that can do things with Google Cloud products and push them into PubSub. So these are things like there's templates, batch templates, and that Google publishes that can do things like take new line delimited JSON in a cloud storage bucket, split them up by line, and publish each one of those lines into PubSub, right? And so once you've done that and use that template, that batch template, now you have it in PubSub, and you can use the PubSub to Splunk HEC template, which we've been showing you today, to get that data into Splunk. So there's like a ton of ways to approach the movement of data and the extraction of data from Google Cloud products and get it into Splunk. And I'll make sure we'll drop a link to what we have on the screen right here with the two PubSub templates into the stream. I think that's all I have for that particular answer.
Yeah, you killed it. Getting all the data in.
Love it. Okay, I think we have time just for a few more questions. So if you have any in the chat, please feel free to add those in. How can I customize the format or content of messages sent from Dataflow to Splunk?
Yeah, I can take this on. I mean, we covered it with the demonstrating the UDF and what you can do inside little JavaScript snippet of code. This is UDF has been around for a while, but now it's available in the console as part of your Dataflow job creation, which is pretty cool. We also just published, literally hot off the press, a tutorial about creating a Dataflow UDF for templates. Again, it walks through some of these examples of reformatting the data, to match your target schema. Now, this is not specific to Splunk. This is generic for any destination, but the same concept apply on how to handle errors in a UDF, how to test the UDF, because keep in mind, a syntax error will break your pipeline. So we want to make sure you validate the UDF beforehand. There's a bunch of example use cases, enriching, transforming, redacting, routing events. Because if you remember, we can route events to a dead letter topic if we don't want them, right? And then by raising an exception. There's a bunch of examples here. And I will point you to also this blog. It's a bit outdated, but still very applicable. This blog also has examples specific for Splunk. So maybe more information that you need, but there's a lot of ways to customize the format of the message to Splunk. There's a bit of a caveat here, which is you want to make sure you have this include PubSub message. Like I showed earlier, the Dataflow template has the option to include the PubSub message wrapper if you want that. And I think the add-on expects that. So that's why, I believe that's the default. But also you can exclude it if you don't want that and you just care for the payload. So the point is the UDF needs to be aware of what format you have. So it's trying to infer what format you have. And that's why you want to make sure that you add those extra 2 lines in your UDF. If you want to see the latest and greatest, again, go back to the Dataflow template. And there's a section on UDF samples that we are adding more and more samples. Click on UDF samples and you can see the transform logs Splunk. I would use that as my baseline and use the blog as examples.
Awesome.
Yeah, I think we got this question hopefully covered.
Amazing. Great. Okay. We've implemented the Splunk Dataflow template in our environment, but are running into Dataflow in execution detail. We notice possible stuckness. We're making that a word, F19, F20. Any advice?
Yeah, I love the possible stuckness. This should be the 2023 theme. No, but I totally sympathize with and I see where this is coming from. It's hard to root cause without knowing the specifics, right? And we don't have access to the logs and metrics. So I highly encourage you and everybody hitting a situation like these to file a support ticket, right? Support ticket will get addressed. We'll have our support tier and our engineers take a look at the issue. If you've gone through our deployment guide and proper configuration, I would file a support ticket after that because this is a supported Dataflow template product. There has been a scenario where this happened. It's an outlier scenario where the message size is over. If the message size is over 7 megabyte and Splunk HEC request fails for some reason, and the message is rerouted to the dead letter queue, that would also fail. And the pipeline gets stuck. Obviously, we don't want that. This has been resolved since. I can go through the specifics of what that happened, but we don't have time here. But the call to action here is to continuously update, make sure your template, you have the latest version. Not only you have security patches, but also all these fixes. This problem was fixed quite a bit a while ago. But yeah, do file support ticket, GitHub repo issues, and other questions, file them on the forum. Yeah, I think I'm gonna wrap it here and put it back to you, Lauren.
Awesome. Yes, thank you so much, everyone, for your information, the demos again, and just, sharing your knowledge with us, and everyone for sticking around for this session. Just last slide here are a couple of additional follow-up resources. There's that community link. So if you do have any follow-up questions, please ask us there. And we'll be sure to get back to you, as well as that recap post that will live in the community, including your written questions and answers and all of the resources that we shared today. And then we'd love to hear your feedback. So if you have an idea for a future topic, additional session or future questions, please let us know. We'd love to make sure that we're creating experiences and content for you that's helpful. So please let us know how we're doing or what you'd like to see with that second link. And then lastly, we have a couple of upcoming sessions. One in particular is on the data engineer certification. So we'll be sharing best practices to prepare for that and answering your questions live. And then we also have an Ask Me Anything session with Terraform and another session on May 3rd on observability. So we'd love to see you there. And yeah, just before we close out, thanks again, Matt and Roy and Spencer. Any final thoughts or suggestions before we close out?
Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Yeah, this has been fun. Thank you for your time, everybody.
Awesome. All
Thank
right.
you.